Welcome back. Time to hear from the government. James Murray, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, joins us now. Good morning to you. I know you want to talk about planning, and we'll get onto that in a second, but let's talk about growth, or lack of. And I know you'll say things are growing faster than anywhere else in the G7, or second fastest in terms of that. But economic growth is still 0.4% below where it was meant to be by now. Why?
So you're right to say the IMF have upgraded our growth prospects this year, and we had the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year. But look, I'm absolutely clear, as is the Chancellor, that we've got more to do, and we want to go further and faster to get the economy growing. And that's why it's so important to focus on things like the planning reforms, which I hope we're going to talk about in a second, because we know that getting Britain building is a crucial way to boosting economic growth and making people in every part of the country better off.
When we look at the figures, second fastest growth in the G7, but when you take into account per capita, the number of people we have here against GDP, we are way behind everybody else, which speaks to the fact that, yes, there's some growth there, but we've got too big a population these days.
Well, we're really focused on making sure that everyone in the country feels better off. And there are two things I'll say on that. Firstly, some of the measures we've taken as a government in the first year or so in office, increasing the national minimum wage, for instance, is really important to boosting people's incomes. But the second point, the bigger point, is around making sure that we have growth in every region and nation of the UK. Because we talk a lot about economic growth and how important that is. But if we want to make people right across the country better off, we have to have that growth in every part of the UK. And that's why some of the planning decisions, some of the investment in infrastructure is so important, because it means that the growth isn't concentrated just in London or the South East, but it can be every part of Britain to make sure people have more money in their pockets.
But the reason you need to make these plan decisions, build this infrastructure, have more houses, is because population growth is out of control. And we're not talking small boats here. We're talking the 750,000 people who appeared in the UK through birth or immigration up to June last year. That's the second highest increase on record. Population growth is out of control, and that's what's costing us all more money.
So I think that there are 2 points here. The first point is that net migration has been too high in recent years. We inherited a situation where it was much too high, and we're bringing it down, and we want it to
still very high, though. I know it has come down. It's still very high.
We have set out our plans in the immigration white paper. We are going to bring down net migration and make sure that we're refocusing migration on higher skilled people who come to the UK and help contribute towards our economic
But really,
success.
James, you look at these figures.
Sorry, can I just say that? Because the other important point was about home building. And we know for many years we have not built the number of homes that we need in this country. And I remember sitting through the previous government talking about planning reform, for 14 years, talking about it, but never doing it. And the difference with us is that we're getting on with those changes and getting things built.
What do you say to those people when it comes to planning reform who are concerned about having a massive warehouse overlooking their backyard, as we've seen in Nacton in Suffolk? What do you say to those people who in Norfolk have seen the land dug up for miles and miles of electricity cables coming from an offshore wind farm? This isn't just NIMBYism, not in my backyard. This is stuff that blights people's lives who have to live next to it. I'm sure there'll be people near Gatwick and Heathrow thinking, what have I got coming next that I'm going to have to look at?
This is about getting the balance right.
Yeah, it's not right for them, though, is it?
But the balance is not right for our country at the moment. And what we have at the moment is too many ways in which people or interest groups or objectors can block planning applications from going ahead. Now, that's not to say that people shouldn't have their say. It's absolutely fair for people to have their say. But we need to make sure it's proportionate and that we balance that with the need for growth. So to take the example of what one of the things the Chancellor is talking about today, at the moment, a lot of big infrastructure projects, really important infrastructure projects for our country, can be judicially reviewed, and they can be stuck in that system for a year and a half on average. So
well, speed up the process then. Don't just overrule
That's what we're doing.
Process.
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. So we're not saying we're going to get rid of that judicial review process. People will still be able to do that, but we want to speed that system up. And what we've set out today, we hope will shorten that time period by at least 6 months. So take it down from a year and a half to a year or less. And that will speed up those decisions. Now, that doesn't mean that people cannot have a judicial review. They can still do that if they think that's appropriate. but it speeds up the decisions because for really important infrastructure decisions, just to swirl around in the courts and not go anywhere isn't in anyone's interests.
In light of our land use in this country, is the government still committed to setting aside 30% of land for nature by the end of the decade?
So we've set out our plans to invest in nature through the Nature Restoration Fund. Now, the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is currently going through its final stages of its parliamentary process at the moment, we hope it'll get royal assent by the end of the year. That set up a new process to make it easier for developments to contribute towards nature and the environment, and that will help towards improving nature in the way you described.
But it's not what I described. It's the thing you signed up to, or the government signed up to, the UN-convened Global Biodiversity Framework. Still committed to that?
Well, the government signed up to that. But what's important for me is what process we use to get there. What do we actually put in place to make sure that we can build new homes, new infrastructure, the new transport that people need, whilst at the same time supporting the environment and nature. And the Nature Restoration Fund, which, as I said, is a new structure within the planning system that we're reforming, means that developers can get on with building but make a contribution towards nature at the same time.
Yeah, but the point being is others are concerned that you don't believe in that anymore. RSPB, their chief operating officer, has said dropping 67 amendments to the planning bill at the 11th hour isn't just poor process, it's legislative chaos.
Well, quite often bills are amended through Parliament. You know, I've sat in on many bills where amendments come in at different stages. This sounds like a rush job, though,
according to the likes of the RSPB and Wildlife and Countryside Link.
When you've got,
they're concerned that it's going to impact nature in this country, of which we are one of the least biodiverse parts of Western Europe.
When you've got a big, complicated bill, and planning is notoriously complicated, you can quite often have amendments as the bill is going through its parliamentary process. That's a normal part of the parliamentary process. And look, what we're saying is we need to get the balance right here. We need to make sure that the system enables growth rather than blocking it. We need to make sure we're building those airport runways, the new roads, the homes people need to live in. You know, all of that we need to get on with, because I think everyone would accept that as a country we haven't been doing that, you know, over the last decade or longer. We need to get on and build, and that's what we're doing through the plans we've announced today and everything we've done since we got into government.
Let's return to what is broadly your brief, which is the economy. Another area we're lacking in is inflation. It's going to be the highest level in the G7 this year, over 3.5% across the year. And that really hits the benefits of anything you'll do when it comes to relaxing planning and trying to stimulate growth. We're all being hit too hard in our pockets for too long, and why isn't the government doing more about it over a year into office?
Well, we are determined to get inflation down because we know the impact it has on families across the country. And one of the most important things that we can do as a government, obviously the Bank of England has its independent role, but one of the most important things we can do as a government to get inflation down, to take the pressure off, is to make sure that public spending is within our fiscal rules. So our fiscal rules, having a tight grip on public spending, making sure that public spending is paid for through tax receipts, you know, that's a really important principle.
Has the word reached Labour's backbenchers on that then? The need to cut the welfare state, which is bloated and expensive and costing us all more money?
Well, look, I'm talking about the big picture here, which is around
that's a pretty big picture. It's a pretty big problem.
It's a big part of the overall public finances. But if you take the public finances in totality, what's important there is that the Chancellor's fiscal rules, which she set out at the budget last year, are ironclad. And the first of those fiscal rules is about saying that day-to-day spending has to be paid for through tax receipts. So you can't.
So taxes are going up, is what you're saying?
No, because that's what the Chancellor set out at the budget last year, and that's one of her two fiscal rules. What that means is that you can't borrow for day-to-day spending, and that's a way to keep a tight grip on public spending that takes the pressure off inflation and also borrowing costs.
Final question, and I know you're not going to preempt what is in your boss's budget when it comes around, but are you still wedded to that commitment of no rises in personal income tax, personal national insurance or VAT?
So we made that commitment and we stand by it. But more broadly,
now and into the future?
More broadly, as you say, I realise I'm going to probably get questions like this every single time I come on TV from now until November the 26th. And my answer will be the same, which is the Chancellor delivers a budget at that
Sure,
time.
sure, sure. No. But I'm not asking specifics about what's in the budget. I'm asking if you
Well, you
still.
are.
No,
That's exactly what you're asking.
Well, I'm asking if you're still committed to what you said you were committed to, and you are.
Well, we stand by that commitment. We made that commitment in the manifesto going into the election, and we stand by that commitment.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.